The Blood Calendar Part 1. Chapter 1, The Sky Cracks Open. The sky should not have looked like that. Not yet. Not for another 72 days. But there it was, splitting at the seam, as if some unseen hand had scratched through the canopy of night. The stars wavered. The moon dimmed. And across the heavens, a single burning line, bright red, like a wound, cut across the sacred glyphs of the sky. Itzel stood alone on the western observatory platform, mouth dry, heart still. He had seen many alignments in his time. Eclipse dances. Solstice convergences. The rise of Venus in her red veil. But never this. This was not marked on the long count calendar. This was not a sign. It was a mistake, or worse, a return. No, he whispered, tracing the cracked bark of the observation post beside him. No, no, you are too early. His hands shook. The shell beads in his robe rattled softly, like bones trying to speak. Beneath him, the city of Chak'Kanul still slept, unaware. Temples rose like giants in the mist. Priests prepared for the eclipse rites. The final night of the Feast of Blood. But none of them knew what he saw in the stars. The wheel was off its track. And something was trying to pull it back. Hours later, inside the narrow temple corridor where time was kept in stone, Itzel ran his fingers across the ancient glyphs, tracing the serpentine lines of the long count calendar. The end was near, but not the prophesied end. A different one. A sealed cycle hidden in the margins. A ring of red glyphs lost beneath layers of calculated prophecy. Time was not ending. It was repeating. And worse, it required blood to keep moving. This is no prophecy, he muttered. It's a feeding. A sound behind him made him flinch. Not footsteps. Fabric. He turned. In the shadowed doorway stood Ixkin, daughter of the Ajah, cloaked in a mantle of crimson feathers, eyes sharp with sleepless curiosity. They said you hadn't returned home. I had a feeling I'd find you, buried in stone again. Her voice was softer than the wind, but there was strength behind it. She had her father's jaw, but none of his patience. You shouldn't be here, Itzel said. And yet, here I am. She stepped forward, looking past him at the glyphs. Are you hiding something, Itzel? I'm trying to understand something. The eclipse? He hesitated. Worse. A silence fell between them. The scent of copal and old ink filled the air. Ixkin looked at the glyph wall and tilted her head. You were the only one my father trusted to read the stars. Do you think he was wrong? That stopped him. Itzel looked at her, not as a child he once held on festival nights, not as a noble, not even as a woman, but as something else entirely, the only person who still thought he mattered. No, he said. He wasn't wrong. But I may be far too late. That night, after she left, Itzel returned to the observatory. The red line still burned faintly in the sky, like a wound waiting to reopen. He stared at it until his knees ached. And in the stone basin beside the star map, where offerings were once left for the gods of time, he saw something he hadn't placed there. A single black feather, coated in dried blood. The first sign. The first glyph of the red cycle. Chapter 2, The Death of the Ajah. The day of the eclipse began with celebration. Drums echoed across the steppe temples of Chak'Kanul, shaking loose dust from stone-carved gods. Incense smoke twisted through the air like spirits dancing through the morning. The scent of burning copal and crushed rosewood clung to every robe, every feathered headdress, every breath. At the Temple of the 13 Skies, nobles gathered in radiant robes, faces painted in the sacred ochre gold of vision seekers. On the highest tier, where only the most honored were permitted, sat Ajah Kawil, king of Chak'Kanul, stoic, cloaked in crimson and obsidian, with the double-headed serpent crown set above his brow. And beside him, his daughter, Ixkin, calm and unreadable. The city had waited 3 years for this moment. A total eclipse, rare and holy. A blessing. The priests said so. The murals promised it. The drums demanded it. But Itzel watched from the shadows of the temple's upper alcoves, fingers clenched around his ceremonial staff. He watched the sky, not with awe, but with terror. The sun was too red. The air too still. The birds had stopped singing. As the moon swallowed the sun, a priest stepped forward to begin the ritual. A slave knelt beside the altar, eyes wide but silent. His heart would be offered as a gift to the gods of sight and time. The ritual blade gleamed. Itzel tried not to look. He had witnessed enough sacrifice in his life. But his gaze was drawn, not to the altar, but to the Ajah himself. Kawil had risen to bless the moment. His right hand lifted. His mouth opened. But no words came. Instead, his body went rigid. A beat too long. Then a shudder ran through him. And blood, thin, bright, and sudden, spilled from his mouth. Gasps. Screams. The high priest froze mid-motion, knife still raised. Ixkin caught her father as he crumpled to his knees. Itzel moved without thinking, rushing down the temple stairs, the staff clutched like a weapon or a prayer. He reached the king's side just as the eclipse reached full shadow. Everything dimmed. Even the air felt heavy. Poison, someone hissed. No, sorcery. A curse during the eclipse, blasphemy. The whispers grew sharp and fast, snapping like serpent tails. The old stargazer was here. He knew this would happen. He read the signs. Itzel barely heard them. Kawil's eyes, once sharp with wisdom, flickered like fading embers. His mouth moved as if to speak. Itzel leaned closer. "Don't," the king rasped. "Don't, let it, turn." Then he was gone. By nightfall, the city was in mourning, but also in motion. Ritual fires burned outside the palace. Priests in white and gold debated in secret. Guards blocked every exit from the central district. And Itzel? Itzel was summoned. Not to mourn, but to answer. He stood in the council chamber of echoes, stone walls marked with sigils of justice and judgment. There were no flames in the braziers. Only shadows. A half-circle of high priests and advisors faced him, their expressions grim. The king was healthy, one-intoned. "He bled at the moment the sun vanished," said another. And the old priest, this one, was seen speaking of danger, of doom. Itzel did not bow. "I did speak of danger," he said. "Because I read the sky. And what I saw was not a prophecy. It was a repetition." Of what? Of something we were never meant to remember. Do you deny poisoning the Ajah? I would rather cut my own heart out than harm the man who trusted me with the stars. The priests looked unconvinced. Then Ixkin entered. Her eyes were rimmed with sleepless fury, but she did not look at Itzel with suspicion. She looked at him like someone holding onto a ledge no one else could see. "My father's final words were for you," she said. "That means one of two things: either you killed him, or he believed you were the only one who could stop what's coming." The chamber fell silent. "For now," she continued, "let him go." "This is not the law," one priest snapped. "No," Ixkin replied. "It is a command." And in that moment, she became more than a daughter. She became a storm dressed in gold. Itzel walked out, his life spared for the moment, but his name already stained. In the distance, the eclipse faded. But the damage had been done. The Ajah was dead. and in the shadows of the lower city, where the wind twisted in unfamiliar ways, the red cycle had begun to turn. Chapter 3: The Stranger from the Trees. They found him at dawn, standing perfectly still beneath the jungle canopy. Naked except for a ragged cloth around his waist, skin streaked with dried blood and dirt, his eyes staring not at the patrol that surrounded him, but past them, into the rising light. He didn't run. He didn't speak. He only breathed, slow and steady, as if waiting for someone to remember him. The guards approached with war paint still smeared from Eclipse patrol. Captain Chak'Kanul led the squad, tall and broad-shouldered, obsidian blade across his back, expression carved from stone. "You there," he called. "By the gods, answer." No reply. Then they saw the carvings. Not tattoos. Not paint. Glyphs, ancient, sacred, burned and cut directly into the man's skin. Along his arms, across his chest, spiraling around his neck like a collar of language. Some glowed faintly under the rising sun, as if alive. The guards hesitated. Chak'Kanul didn't. "Bind him," he ordered. "But do not touch the glyphs." The jungle fell quiet as the wind stilled. In the distance, birds refused to sing. By midday, word of the stranger had reached every corner of Chak'Kanul. Some said he was a cursed offering from a rival city. Others whispered he was a ghost in flesh, escaped from the cenote of the drowned. The older priests called him an omen. Itzel heard none of this. He was already waiting when the guards arrived at the temple prison, eyes sharp beneath his hood, fingers stained with ink and panic. "Let me see him first," he told Chak'Kanul. "You owe me that much." The guard captain hesitated. "The council will want answers. I'm your best chance." They led him into the inner chamber. The man sat cross-legged in the center of the floor, shackled but calm, unmoving. His skin was lean and sun-darkened, the glyphs etched with unholy precision, lines that should have taken days were carved as if by a single, endless hand. Itzel stepped closer. And froze. He recognized one of the glyphs. It was a name. "You've read these before?" Chak'Kanul asked from the doorway. "Not exactly." "Then how?" "Because this one," Itzel pointed to the figure spiraling from the stranger's collarbone to his heart, "this is the seal of the red cycle." Chak'Kanul frowned. "I thought that was a myth." "So did I." Itzel knelt beside the man. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. The stranger blinked. Then lifted his right hand, and slowly began to trace a glyph in the air. It glowed faintly, then vanished. Itzel understood. The man could not speak. But he knew the sacred hand glyphs, used only by star priests and keepers of old rites. "Your name?" The man traced another symbol. Then another. Itzel's throat tightened. "Your Sekel," he whispered. "No. That name hasn't been spoken in." "No, that can't be right." Sekel nodded once. The final glyph shimmered faintly between them. A glyph meaning returned. Later that night, Itzel sat with a torch and parchment, frantically sketching the glyphs from Sekel's body with trembling hands. They weren't just decorative. They were a codex. A living record of a prophecy older than the current calendar, older than Chak'Kanul itself. A cycle of blood, memory, and sacrifice that spanned generations, and demanded repetition. In the last line, centered over the stranger's heart, was the one glyph Itzel feared most. 13 Baktan, the binding year. The final glyph of the red cycle. The one that signaled the end. Or the restart. Itzel stared into the fire, heart racing. He thought of Ixkin's face as she held her father's dying body. The glyphs whispering through Sekel's skin. The red line across the sky. The Ajah's final words returned, soft and sharp. Don't let it turn. The calendar hadn't ended. It had started again. And someone, or something, was making sure it finished this time. Chapter 4, Eyes of Obsidian. The Temple of Judgment had no windows. It was built to hold shadows, not light. Carved into the base of the city's central pyramid, the hall was used only in times of great unrest, war trials, dynastic disputes, exile decrees. Itzel had stood here once, decades ago, when he'd been named chief stargazer. It had felt sacred then. Now it felt like a tomb. The great obsidian eyes carved into the walls watched him from every angle. Each one reflected the torchlight and his face, fragmented, distorted, older than he wanted to believe. Kneel, a voice ordered. He did not. 12 high priests stood in a semicircle behind the central stone tribunal, cloaked in gold, white, and crimson. Their eyes were painted black, to see as the gods see. Most of them were younger than Itzel now. Arrogant. Hungry. At the center of the tribunal sat High Priest Halak Tzib, who had once studied beside Itzel as an apprentice. He now looked down at him with measured disdain. You were found in the lower archives, Tzib said, voice calm and cold. Among forbidden records. After speaking of danger. Then the Ajah died. And now, you consort with a marked heretic who bleeds ancient glyphs. He is not a heretic, Itzel replied, he is a warning. He is a trespasser. He carries the red cycle. Gasps echoed behind the tribunal. One of the younger priests stepped forward. That cycle was struck from the records. Sealed by the Third Dynasty. And still, it returns, Itzel said. You can burn the parchment, but not the truth. Tzib's eyes narrowed. Truth is what we choose to preserve. You taught me that. No, Itzel replied, his voice steady now. I taught you that truth is what chooses to survive. Whether we like it or not. The tension cracked like a bowstring. But before Tzib could speak again, a new voice rang out, loud, clear, unmistakable. Let him speak. Heads turned. Ixkin stood in the upper corridor, arms crossed over her chest, eyes glittering with heat. She descended the stairway slowly, deliberately, draped in deep blue mourning cloth, but her bearing anything but submissive. He is no traitor. He is my father's voice of stars. He was trusted in this chamber once. He will speak again. You hold no power here, Ixkin, one priest hissed. The throne has not yet passed. Then crown me, she said flatly. Silence. Or challenge me. Right here. In front of the gods. None moved. Ixkin turned to Itzel. She met his gaze for the first time in days, and in that moment, something passed between them. Not trust. Not yet. But a vow waiting to be spoken. Tell them what you saw, she said. All of it. Itzel raised his hands. The eclipse was not prophecy. It was symptom. The red cycle has returned, an old pattern designed to keep time turning in blood and shadow. That man, the stranger, Eclipse, is living proof. His body is carved with memory. He carries glyphs I do not understand and truths I was taught to forget. You speak of forbidden cycles, Tzib said, as though they have power. Because they do. And if we don't remember what they require, we will repeat what they demand. The tribunal murmured. One priest whispered, he sounds mad. Another, or worse, right. Tzib raised a hand, silencing them. Very well. If what you say is true, if this red cycle demands blood, then what does it want now? Itzel didn't hesitate. It wants a beginning. And who must be the first to bleed? If we don't act, he said, all of us. After hours of tense deliberation, Itzel was released, not forgiven, not trusted, but watched. He was to remain within the temple grounds under sacred observation. Which meant a cage without bars. Ixkin walked beside him as he left the chamber. You shouldn't have done that, he murmured. Neither should you. You just painted a target on your own chest. Someone had to remind them I'm still my father's daughter. He stopped walking. Why are you helping me, Ixkin? She turned to him, expression unreadable in the twilight. Because something's coming, she said. And I don't trust anyone else to read it. Then softer, as she looked away. And because I saw it too. The red in the sky. That night, from the confines of his quarters, Itzel watched the sky again. The stars had returned, but not in their rightful places. One constellation pulsed faintly where it should not be. A jaguar with a broken eye. A glyph of devouring. And far below, in the sacred prison where Eclipse was held, the stranger traced the same symbol against the floor. And the stone whispered back. Chapter 5, The Calendar That Bleeds. The Temple of the Nine Mouths was older than Chak'Kanul itself. Built long before the current dynasty, it rose like a coiled serpent from the jungle stone, 9 arched entrances carved with open jaws, each one leading into a separate corridor. Most had been sealed for centuries. The official story claimed the inner chambers were unstable. Itzel knew better. They weren't unstable. They were dangerous. Itzel moved through the second corridor from the left, the jaguar mouth, marked with obsidian fangs and a tongue of jade. The air inside was thick, metallic. Torches were forbidden here, so he carried only a bowl of burning coals cradled in a bronze basket, casting red light along the ancient glyph-lined walls. The walls whispered. Not literally. But the carvings were so dense, so layered, that the light played tricks. Stories moved at the corner of his eyes, a star bleeding, a serpent rising, a heart being fed to a wheel. The murals here weren't for ceremony. They were for warning. Halfway down the corridor, Itzel found what he was looking for. The gate of the deep codex. A panel of black stone sealed with golden wax and bound with cords of dried human sinew. He hesitated only a moment before slicing the cords with his ritual blade. The wax crumbled. And the door opened with a sound like breath returning to a sealed tomb. The chamber beyond was small, circular, and silent. Its walls were covered in faded red paint, not decorative, but smeared, chaotic, almost frenzied. At the center, on a low pedestal, sat a black obsidian codex, cracked down the middle, bound with cords of silver wire and carved bone. It was weeping. Thin rivulets of dark fluid, too dark to be ink, slowly trickled from the bottom edge of the codex onto the stone pedestal. Itzel knelt, touched it, and stared in disbelief. It was warm. It smelled faintly of blood. He lit a fresh coal and opened the codex. The pages did not turn like any normal book. They shifted like layers of skin, heavy, textured, etched with spiraling glyphs too ancient for standard translation. Some of the symbols were written in the shape of moons, others with feathered jaws and eye glyphs shaped like tears. But one thing was clear. This was no calendar. This was a vessel. And the vessel was full. Itzel read the title aloud. Chak'Kanul. The calendar that feeds pain. As he read, the glyphs lit faintly under the coal's glow. He flipped to a page marked with a crimson border. It described the first cycle, 13 offerings, one from each seal of time. Each offered in blood, in order, to keep the gate of repetition closed. If any were missed, the gate would open, and time would not just reset, it would devour the years already lived. This isn't prophecy, he whispered. It's a recipe. He turned the next page. It showed a figure, faceless, placing their own heart into a stone bowl beneath a blazing sun. Around them, cities crumbled into dust. At the bottom of the page was a glyph he hadn't seen in years. The mark of the jaw. Kwile's royal blood had been the first seal. The red cycle had already begun. Itzel stepped back, breath ragged. The codex's ink now spilled faster. As he moved to close the book, he noticed a single fingerprint in the blood on the pedestal, still wet, recent. Not his. Someone else had already read this. He wasn't the first. Footsteps echoed behind him. He turned quickly, too quickly, and knocked over the coal basket. Flames burst across the stone floor. He stamped them out, panting in the smoke, but when he looked back to the codex, a new symbol had appeared on the page. Still forming. Etching itself slowly, like ink bleeding from the paper's veins. Itzel leaned in. The glyph showed a familiar figure. A man with a star map across his chest and a serpent wrapped around his throat. The name beneath it. Itzel. And beside it, a burning sun marked second seal. He stumbled backward. The codex knew him. Expected him. Claimed him. He wasn't just here to stop the red cycle. He was part of it. Far above the sealed chamber, as the temple bells rang to mark the end of the day, the eclipse-shadowed sun pulsed once behind the clouds. And somewhere in the city, blood was drawn again. Not by blade, but by choice. Chapter 6, Glyphs of the Lost. The moon hung pale and veiled that night, just visible through the swirling mist that curled through Chak'Kanul's upper courtyards like smoke searching for a fire. The sky had not healed since the eclipse. The constellations flickered out of alignment, as if time itself were blinking in confusion. Itzel returned from the Temple of the Nine Mouths covered in ash, ink, and the memory of what he had read. His name. His blood. The second seal. He said nothing as the guards escorted him through the winding passages of the priest quarters. He only asked for one thing. I want to speak with the prisoner. Alone. Eclipse sat on the cool stone of the inner sanctum, unbound now, at Ixkin's quiet order. No weapon had been found on him, no sound passed his lips. But his eyes never stopped watching. When Itzel entered, the stranger turned his head as if he had been waiting. The brazier in the center of the room hissed low, casting long shadows up the curved walls. Smoke drifted upward through a chimney slit carved like a serpent's open mouth. Itzel knelt across from him. You came to warn us, he said. Eclipse nodded once. And, you knew I'd be part of this. Another nod. Then show me what I'm not seeing. Eclipse raised both hands. Deliberate, slow, ancient in motion. He began to sign the sacred glyphs of time, but not as Itzel had ever seen them. These were older. Some signs mirrored, some reversed. He wasn't using the current calendar glyphs. He was speaking in the red calendar. A calendar outlawed centuries ago. A calendar built to count something not forward, but inward. Where did you learn this? Itzel whispered. Eclipse paused. Then, using a shard of burnt clay, he began drawing on the floor. The glyphs that emerged burned like truth. Itzel watched as symbols unfurled. A serpent swallowing its own tail. A heart split in 4 directions. A sun that rose twice in a single sky. Eclipse pointed to the final glyph, one Itzel had seen only once before, in the Obsidian Codex. A cracked sun with a bleeding glyph at its center. It was the sigil of binding time. This is the ritual, Itzel murmured. It's not to stop the end of time, it's to trap it. Eclipse met his gaze, and for the first time since their meeting, Itzel thought he saw something close to fear behind the stranger's calm. The chamber door opened. Ixkin stepped inside, hood lowered, robes of mourning darkened by rain. She looked from Itzel to the glyphs on the floor, and her expression shifted. Not to confusion, but to recognition. "I've seen those symbols," she said. "On a wall my father kept sealed. The night chamber. I was never allowed inside. He said, it wasn't for queens. It was for prisoners," Itzel said grimly. "Or prophets. My father knew. He may have known more than we do now." Ixkin stared at the bleeding sun glyph. "If this is the red calendar, what happens when it finishes its count?" Eclipse didn't answer. He traced one final glyph on the floor, where the others formed a broken circle. A glyph shaped like a mouth. Open. Devouring. Itzel sat back, mind spinning. This calendar wasn't built to keep track of years. It was built to count the time we lost. The years taken. Forgotten. Maybe, even rewritten. Ixkin's voice was cold. Then we are living on stolen memory. Or someone else's borrowed future. A rumble sounded far above. Temple bells. A priest's funeral pyre had just been lit. Another one. Another death. Another seal? Itzel stood abruptly. We're not just part of the cycle. We're feeding it, without knowing. He looked at Eclipse. We need to find the rest of the calendar. All of it. The full ring. Before someone finishes it for us. Eclipse nodded once, and then did something he hadn't done before. He placed a hand on Itzel's chest. Fingers over the heart. Then slowly, traced a spiral glyph. Not a warning. Not a curse. A key. Chapter 7, The River Teeth. It was said the palace of Chak'Kanul stood atop a river of stone. That beneath its foundations ran a forgotten channel, once used to carry holy water from the cenotes to the temple altars. Itzel had always thought it a myth. A ceremonial lie. Until Ixkin led him to the sealed staircase behind her father's private chamber. The steps were carved with no name, no glyphs, only symbols of teeth. Dozens of them. Carved with obsessive care. Rows upon rows, wide and narrow, blunt and jagged. "What is this place?" Itzel asked. "My father called it the serpent's spine. He said if I ever went down here, I'd never return the same. That may be the first time I agree with him. They brought only what they could carry. A bowl of coals. A satchel of herbs. Eclipse." The silent stranger walked behind them barefoot, eyes never blinking, his head tilted slightly as if listening to something beneath the stone. The steps spiraled down through warm air that reeked of copper and wet earth. Lichen clung to the walls. The deeper they went, the more the air pressed in, not with weight, but with expectation. Something was waiting. The final stair gave way to a tunnel, just wide enough to walk two abreast. Water trickled somewhere in the dark. And ahead, faintly pulsing, was the red glow of old glyphs etched into the stone floor. "Look," Ixkin whispered. A ring of glyphs circled a pit carved in the middle of the tunnel, its edge lined with sharp obsidian slats, like teeth. Beneath it, a dry channel descended into darkness. Itzel knelt and ran his hand over one of the glyphs. It was faded, fractured, part of the red calendar sequence. Eclipse crouched beside him and began tracing missing segments with his finger. The glyphs responded. Faint light crawled through the cracks, connecting, syncing. Then came the sound. A deep, low growl. Not from above. Not from behind. From beneath the tunnel. Before Itzel could react, the pit trembled. A splash of water echoed up through the shaft, and then a grinding sound began, like wheels turning inside a throat. Bones surfaced in the water below. Dozens. Then hundreds. Skulls with ceremonial paint still clinging to their foreheads. Ribcages cracked open like flowers. Vertebrae still wrapped in ancient fabric. A blood channel, Itzel said, horrified. But not just for ritual drainage. This was a collection pit. For offerings? Ixkin asked. For those who failed to become them. The growl deepened. And then something began to rise. A jaw. Massive. Petrified. Wrapped in sinew glyphs that burned faintly. Made not of bone, but of fused skulls, sharpened and clamped together into a monstrous, artificial bite. Eclipse stepped forward, unfazed. He raised his hand and drew a new glyph in the air, one Itzel didn't recognize. The glyph hovered over the pit. The jaw froze. Then slowly, it sank back into the depths. What did you do? Ixkin whispered. He calmed it, Itzel murmured. The glyph he drew, it was a seal. One I've never seen. Do you think it was part of the original calendar? No. I think it was added later. Someone tried to stop the cycle before. They failed. But they left behind something that could still be used. Beyond the pit, the tunnel widened into a long, sloped spiral corridor. The walls here were covered in carvings, not murals, but stories without words. Each panel showed a version of the world being consumed in a different way. One by fire. One by flood. One by memory. One by repetition. Itzel touched the final wall. Beneath layers of dust and lichen, he found a glyph, half-carved, abandoned mid-chisel. The Ring of 13, he whispered. The full red cycle. Is it complete? Ixkin asked. No. It was never finished. Why? Itzel looked at the crumbling pit behind them. At the offerings. At the creature made of death and time. Because the last person who tried didn't survive to carve it. They found the last stone tucked into the spiral wall, a disk of jade and obsidian, carved with all 12 completed glyphs of the red calendar. At the center was a hollow space. A 13th spot. Empty. Waiting. Itzel stared into it and saw, for a moment, his own face reflected in the obsidian. And then Eclipse placed a single finger against the empty glyph space. And bled. Chapter 8, The Firebound Seal. The city was quieter now. Too quiet. Since the Ajah's death and the eclipse, festivals had been cancelled. Drums had fallen silent. The painted dancers no longer practiced in the courtyards, and the markets had thinned, as if even the merchants were afraid to speak above whispers. But the silence broke the morning the sky turned gold. Not with sun. With smoke. High Priest Ixkin had called for a renewal ceremony, to reaffirm divine guidance, in the absence of the king. Held atop the Temple of Sight, it was to be a public offering, fire, blood, vision. Itzel stood at the base of the temple steps, forced to watch under guard. Eclipse was forbidden from attending. Ixkin was not. She sat alone in the ceremonial archway, still in mourning colors, flanked by 2 silent attendants. Her eyes never left the altar. A young priest stepped forward, chosen for his clarity of soul. Painted in white ash, he stood bare-chested beneath the sun as Ixkin raised a smoking bowl of copal over his head. We offer this soul, the high priest intoned, as a beacon to the gods. May fire cleanse and open the way. Itzel's stomach twisted. The words were wrong. Too old. That's not a vision right, he muttered to the guard beside him. That's a red cycle incantation. The bowl was placed at the priest's feet. Ixkin struck flint and lit the oil-soaked herbs. Flames rose. Too fast. Too high. They caught the hem of the young priest's robe, and then his skin. he screamed. Not once. Not briefly. A sound tore from his throat that did not belong to a man, but to a creature being unwritten. The flames did not consume him. They outlined him, burning in the shape of a glyph. A perfect spiral of fire across his chest and throat. One of the missing glyphs from the red calendar. The third seal. The fire burst upward in a tower of gold and red, blinding the crowd. By the time the smoke cleared, the body was ash. Only the glyph burned into the stone beneath him remained. It pulsed once, then faded. And then the drums began again. Only one. Slow. Insistent. The beat of something ancient waking. Itzel and Ixkin met again that night in the cloister garden behind the Temple of Winds, surrounded by whispering trees and half-buried statuary. Eclipse stood nearby, silent, fingers twitching faintly. He wasn't supposed to be chosen, Ixkin said, her voice sharp with guilt. He was a boy from the artisan quarter. A visionary, not a sacrifice. The fire recognized him, Itzel said. It branded the glyph through him. That's not something our rites can do. Then what does it mean? Eclipse stepped forward and drew a glyph in the air. It resembled an eye made of flame. It means, Itzel said slowly, that the red cycle is no longer being fulfilled by human hands. It's fulfilling itself. Itzel held the glyph scroll they'd retrieved from the serpent channel beneath the palace. He unrolled it to a particular line. 13 seals, he said. 13 glyphs. Each one marked by blood or memory. We thought they had to be carved, but what if they only have to be burned into reality? So what's next? Ixkin asked. Another offering. Another person? Another part of the world lost to binding time. Eclipse stepped forward, hand trembling slightly. He raised his palm toward the garden censer. The fire inside rose without wind. It curled, lifted, and began to form another glyph, this one new, incomplete. A fourth seal forming already. Someone else had been marked. But they didn't yet know who. A sound came from the temple steps behind them, fast footsteps, panting. Chak'Kanul, armor loose, his forehead dripping sweat. Ixkin. Another priest is dead. This one, he burst into flame in his sleep. What glyph? Itzel asked hoarsely. I don't know, Chak'Kanul replied. But they said it looked like a serpent biting the sun. Itzel froze. So did Eclipse. So did the flame. Then Eclipse turned slowly, and pointed toward the western quarter of the city. Where the Temple of the Twin Mouths, once sealed, was now wide open. Chapter 9, The Twin Eclipse. The stars had betrayed their keepers. That was the only explanation Itzel could muster as he traced the night sky from the observatory tower for the third time in a single day. And still, the signs remained the same. The moon would devour the sun again. In 4 nights. It's impossible, he whispered aloud. Ixkin sat on the stone ledge nearby, arms wrapped around her knees, cloak flapping in the high wind. Eclipse stood against the far wall, eyes fixed on the horizon like a man waiting for a long overdue ship. We just had an eclipse, she said. The astronomers said the next would come in 52 years, Itzel replied flatly. Yes. I was one of them. He pointed to the glyph etched into the shadow basin, a spiral jaguar biting its tail, its eye marked red. This symbol doesn't appear in the current calendar. But it appears in the red cycle. You're saying, the sky itself is following the wrong calendar? No, Itzel said grimly. I'm saying the right one has returned. The Temple of the Twin Mouths had been sealed for generations. It was too sacred, too dangerous, its dual corridors once used for rites of voice and silence. The left was meant for the living. The right, for the dead. But now, both mouths gaped wide. Chak'Kanul led them through the left corridor first. The air was hot, unnaturally so. The walls trembled faintly beneath their fingertips, as if breathing. Along the stone floor, obsidian tiles lit up as they passed, forming glyphs not carved, but remembered. At the end of the corridor was a chamber with no ceiling, open to the sky, as if built to receive something not from above, but from outside time. Itzel knelt at the center, running his hands across the floor. Beneath the dust, he found a stone dial, a perfect ring, etched with 13 sigils, incomplete. In the center was a single carved depression. Empty. This is the heart of the red cycle, he whispered. The calendar doesn't count days. It marks offerings. Each eclipse feeds it. And with this next one, Ixkin asked, will it be complete? No. This is the mirror eclipse. The false one. False? It mimics the true cycle. But if we don't stop it, the true eclipse will come with nothing left to devour. Eclipse stepped into the center of the ring and raised both hands. The glyphs on the floor began to glow, then lift. Not from stone. From memory. They hovered in the air, flickering like fireflies trapped in breath. One glyph hovered before Ixkin. It resembled her crest, the royal bloodline, but cracked. It's your name, Itzel said, stunned. But not written in your voice. It's from a past cycle. You mean? I've lived before? Eclipse slowly nodded. And what happened to her then, she whispered. Itzel said nothing. But the glyph glowed red, the color of sacrifice. As they exited the temple, a messenger ran up the steps, breathless, panic in his voice. Another sign, he said. In the star pool. The astronomers say a new star has appeared, too bright. Too fast. Itzel's blood went cold. A masked star, he said. A star that shouldn't exist, heralds a gate that should never open. Eclipse was already walking ahead. He did not speak, but he turned to them, and pointed skyward. There, among the stars that had betrayed them, was a single new light. It pulsed red. And it was moving. Back in his chambers, Itzel spread his scrolls like a broken map across the floor. The stars no longer obeyed prediction. The bloodline glyphs were beginning to reverse. And every record he once trusted, was now a warning instead of a guide. The twin eclipse was coming. The mirror would be lit. And when it was, one of them would be chosen not by fate, but by repetition. Ixkin watched him from the doorway. Do you still think we can stop it? He didn't answer. He only looked at the spiral of fire slowly forming in the center of the scroll. And for the first time, he truly feared they might already be too late. Chapter 10, The Cenote of the Drowned Truth. Itzel had visited many sacred places in his lifetime, but none whispered like the Cenote no Jaka. It was not marked on the city maps. No murals depicted it. No priest spoke its name aloud. Even the path that led to it had become a ghost trail, overgrown with saber roots, swallowed by vines, watched by nothing but silent stone masks carved into the jungle's trees. No Jaka, Ixkin whispered, as they emerged before the yawning sinkhole's edge. The great water. The drowned truth, Itzel corrected. This is where memory goes when it's not allowed to die. The cenote mouth opened wide into the earth, a perfect circle of black water cradled by jagged limestone walls. A single stone stair spiraled down, slick with moisture, slick with time. Eclipse was the first to descend, moving barefoot and fearless. Itzel followed with a torch in one hand, herbs tied to his belt, and prayers tumbling beneath his breath. Ixkin came last, though her steps never faltered. If this place is so dangerous, she said softly, why come now? Because we're being lied to, Itzel replied. Not just by the priests. By history. The cycle isn't just repeating, it's correcting itself. And we need to see what it's hiding. At the bottom, the torchlight danced across the water's still surface. The cenote was unnaturally calm, no wind, no current, no ripple. And yet, the moment Itzel knelt beside it, his reflection twitched. Not with his own movement, but with someone else's memory. Eclipse reached into the satchel he'd carried since the temple. From it, he drew a stone carved with a faded glyph, an eye split by a jagged tear. Without a word, he dropped it into the water. The cenote screamed. Not aloud, but in light. Flashes erupted across the water's surface, visions layered on visions, spiraling into motion. Itzel staggered back. And then, like threads pulled tight, the water drew him in. He was no longer in his body. He stood now in a different Chak'Kanul. The city was smaller, younger. The temples shone white and clean. The sky burned gold. Around him, masked priests moved through a ritual, but their chants were warped, reversed, language spoken backward. At the center of the square, a prisoner knelt, eyes closed. Itzel recognized him. It was himself. But younger. Or older. Or someone else entirely. The priests carved a glyph into the man's back with a knife of bone. The man screamed. The sky cracked. And the red eclipse began. The people cheered. But beneath their feet, the stone glowed. A voice, soft and ancient, filled Itzel's ears, though no mouth spoke it. The seal was broken before it was made. The blood was given, but not accepted. Time feeds only when time agrees. Itzel turned. And saw Ixkin there, too. Not as she was, but as a queen in crimson obsidian, her chest marked with a flame-shaped glyph. She held a dagger carved with a serpent spine. And she was crying. Itzel's eyes snapped open. He was on his back beside the cenote. Ixkin knelt over him, water streaming down her arms, panic in her eyes. "What did you see?" she asked. He sat up slowly, vision still blurred. The last red cycle. What happened? It failed. Why? Because the offering didn't believe it was real. He looked at her, breath trembling. I was the offering. You were there? No. I was him. Or, he was me. Eclipse stood by the water's edge, arm raised. A glyph floated above his palm, glowing brighter now. Completing. It was the fifth seal. No longer waiting. Already written. Already chosen. And in that moment, Itzel realized the most terrible truth. The red cycle doesn't choose victims. It chooses reminders. The cenote rippled again. Shapes began to rise beneath the water, figures, bloated and boneless, drifting upward with hollow eyes and carved chests. Each one bore a glyph. Each one had once been chosen. Each one had failed. Ixkin stepped back, hand on her blade. We have to go. Not yet, Itzel said, staring into the black water. One of them isn't dead yet. Eclipse turned toward him, eyes burning. He traced one final glyph on the air, slow and deliberate. It meant. Soon. Chapter 11, The Mirror Jaguar. They said the path beneath the cenote Nojaka was cursed. Carved not by builders, but by time itself, the tunnels below the waterline were said to lead to the Chamber of Lost Offerings, a place where those chosen by the gods but rejected by time were buried in silence. We don't have to go deeper, Ixkin said quietly. We saw enough. We saw the past, Itzel replied, stepping down the slick stone ramp carved behind the cenote's rim. But not what's waiting in the present. Eclipse walked beside him, silent, his right palm bleeding faintly, a trail that seemed to shimmer in the darkness. The tunnel narrowed. Then widened. Then breathed. They emerged into a dome-shaped chamber lined entirely in mirror-polished obsidian. Hundreds of fragmented surfaces stared back at them, warped, glinting, echoing every motion twice over. The torches flickered strangely here. The flame didn't dance forward, it retreated. And on the far wall, carved in blood and silver, was a jaguar. But not just any jaguar. This one had no eyes. Only mirrors where eyes should be. Itzel took a step closer. The jaguar's body, though carved into the stone, seemed to breathe with slow pulses. Its obsidian form rippled, as though submerged in water just beneath the skin of the world. Eclipse knelt and placed his palm on the stone before it. The mirrors blinked. Once. Twice. Then the jaguar moved. The wall split apart with a grinding sound, and the jaguar stepped forward, not carved now, but alive, draped in shadows and glimmering light. Its fur was made of reflections. Its claws of ivory glass. Its face showed no expression. Only shifting images. It spoke, not aloud, but directly into their minds. The voice was calm. Measured. Familiar. You shouldn't have come here, Itzel. Itzel froze. The voice, it was the Ajaz. Kawil's voice. His old friend. His king. This isn't possible, he whispered. And yet you stand, the mirror jaguar replied. Where all others fell. The jaguar circled them, slowly, each step echoing like glass cracking. You seek to end the cycle. You carry the broken glyph. But you have already failed it once. With a blink, the chamber around them shifted. The mirrors now reflected scenes, not their own, but fragments of past lives. Itzel saw himself as a younger man, hands bloodied, standing over a cracked altar. A ritual unfinished. He saw Ixkin in full queen's garb, whispering a name as flames rose behind her. He saw Eclipse, burning. Again and again. You were given the gift of forgetfulness, the jaguar said. But memory always returns. Even now, the seals burn in your bones. It stopped before Itzel and leaned close. He saw his reflection split into 3 versions, each one older, more worn. You carry the name of the second flame, it said. But the fire no longer waits for you. Another has been marked. Tell me who, Itzel demanded. Tell me who carries the next seal. The jaguar's mouth did not move, but the mirrors behind it twisted. Reflections formed into a child. A boy, no older than 12, holding a ceremonial scroll. Itzel recognized the setting, one of the lower city schools. No, Ixkin gasped. That's Toka. My cousin's son. The jaguar's mirrors burned red. The red cycle does not know mercy. It remembers only function. Each time it turns, it chooses sooner. Younger. Until memory itself is born in blood. Itzel stepped forward. Then take me, he said. Spare him. Use me. You were already used, the jaguar replied. And you failed. Eclipse stepped forward now. He raised both hands and drew a new glyph, one that twisted the air around them like wind caught in a spiral. The jaguar roared, not in pain, but in recognition. The glyph struck its chest, and for a moment, the mirrors cracked. One by one, they shattered, spraying the chamber in blinding shards of reflected memory. When the light faded, the jaguar was gone. In its place, burned into the floor, was a single word. Remember. Back on the surface, the sky had darkened again, days early. The second eclipse was beginning to form. Ixkin held the memory of the child's face in her chest like a burning stone. We can't let the cycle choose him. It already has, Itzel said. But we're going to change the story. Eclipse stared at his hands. A new glyph had formed on his skin, scarlet and white. The sixth seal. Unchosen. Yet written. And now, it was moving. Chapter 12, The Council's Secret. Ixkin had never entered the night room. It was the one place in the palace where even her father's voice grew quiet. The one door he had forbidden her to touch, even as a child. It was hidden beneath the old archives, behind a false mural of the feathered serpent swallowing the moon. Only 2 people in her life had ever entered it. One was dead. The other was Tzib, now the highest voice in Chak'Kanul's priesthood. And he was hiding something. The stone mural did not open with keys or pressure plates. It opened with blood. Ixkin sliced the pad of her thumb and pressed it to the serpent's eye. The stone blinked, actually blinked, and with a hiss, the mural pulled inward, revealing a narrow staircase behind a wall of dust. "We shouldn't be doing this," whispered Chak'Kanul, who had followed her in silence. "If we're caught, then they'll kill us a little earlier than planned." She didn't look back. She descended. The room smelled of smoke and old fire. It was built like a vault, smooth black walls, no windows, and a domed ceiling painted with a map of stars that no longer matched the night sky. At the center stood a single obsidian table carved in the shape of a calendar ring, 13 segments. Each one stained. Shelves lined the walls, scrolls, tablets, cracked codices. And beneath glass lay something far worse. Itzel was right, Ixkin said. She moved to the largest case, pulling back the cloth that covered it. Inside were ritual masks. Dozens. Each carved with the symbol of a red seal. Some were full ceremonial jaguar faces. Others bore serpent mouths, sun eyes, or hollow crescent glyphs. "These aren't ancient relics," she whispered. "They're new. Freshly carved." Chak'Kanul found it first, a leather-bound codex, sealed with red wax and the symbol of the high priesthood. He cracked the seal. Inside were lists. Not of rituals. Of names. Children. Soldiers. Temple servants. Nobles. Beside each name was a glyph and a year. And on many, the glyph was crossed out. Replaced with another. "They're tracking offerings," he said. "Pre-selecting them. Assigning seals. But, why would they do this? Why would they participate in something designed to destroy us?" Ixkin flipped to the final page. One phrase had been carved there, over and over again. "To remember, we must feed the flame. To remain eternal, we must burn in place. Better a cycle than an end." Ixkin found a final scroll, sealed in wax shaped like an eye inside a flame. Her father's personal sigil. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter. Addressed to her. "My daughter. If you are reading this, then either I am dead, or I failed to stop them in time. The red cycle is not prophecy. It is a machine. A prison. Centuries ago, our ancestors feared the chaos of time untethered. So they forged the cycle, not to survive the gods, but to survive the truth, that without memory, we are nothing. They chose repetition over extinction. And we chose to keep their lie alive. The priesthood cannot end the cycle. It will not. It is their anchor, their throne. But you, Ixkin, you were born outside the glyph. You are the 13th flame. You must choose whether this time is the last." She read the final line 3 times. Then folded the letter. And did not cry. Back in her chambers, Ixkin held the ceremonial dagger her father had once given her, the one etched with the jaguar's eye. She looked to Chak'Kanul. "We're not fighting gods," she said. "We're fighting men. And their memory of gods. What do you want to do?" She looked out at the city. The eclipse's glow was already returning to the horizon. The second one. The false one. And with it, another offering. "We burn the mask," she said. "And then we break the ring." In the temple vaults below the priesthood's tower, Halak-Tzib knelt before a brazier of memory fire. He whispered a name. One that had not been spoken since the cycle last turned. And the fire answered. 13 will burn. But only one will end it. His eyes glinted gold. And he smiled.
Every story has an ending. But some mysteries live on. If you enjoyed this tale, don't let it fade into the shadows. Smash that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories that will transport you beyond the veil of the ordinary. Subscribe to our channel and your name will appear at the beginning of our next video, where we will pleasantly thank you for your subscribing. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the unknown. Share your thoughts in the comments. What twists did you see coming? And what secrets do you think still remain? Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and let the next story begin.